And Bruce Feldman, who covers college football for Fox, is now joining us live. And my takeaway on that has always been, listen, the conference USC used to play in no longer exists. You can pay high school football players. We've got to get over this sort of sentimentality, but it is strong, Bruce, with USC Notre Dame. It is really, Notre Dame loves it because they can recruit in California. Like, I get it. Your take on USC's tact, which is, we can take it or leave it. How's that land for you?
No, I think if you're USC, you have a lot of pride in your traditions. I don't think you want to be the one who lets this rivalry lapse. By the way, Colin, it's like, just looking back at this, we can talk about what it takes to get into the playoff. Last year, basically, USC played, in its first year in the Big Ten, played two teams that ended up ranked in the top 25. That's it, two. And one of them, by the way, was Notre Dame. When they were in the Pac-12, the year before they played 3. The year before that, they played 4. So the idea that they're gone to the Big Ten and the Big Ten is so stacked, you know, yeah, there's more teams in it, but you're not playing everybody in the Big Ten. So I think, as somebody who's lived out here for 20-plus years, know a lot of USC people, USC is not, they've taken pride in that they're not Arizona, they're not UCLA, they're not, you know, they're different. They were not playing FCS programs. I don't think that this should be like we got to do this because it gives ourselves the best chance to make it into the playoff. If you're good, you're going to make the playoff. If you're not very good, you know, you squeezing by against Minnesota and Wisconsin and UCLA and Purdue, you know, it's not going to carry water. I mean, this is not this. It's different than it is, let's say, in the argument now with the SEC. They're playing a lot more high-level teams. I think this is a very un-USC move for USC based on what I feel like what makes that place special. It's the traditions.
Before I get to the Big Ten and Sark and Arch Manning, let's stay on USC. Their over-under is 7.5. Vegas, DraftKings are usually pretty accurate at this stuff. Now, they do have size they haven't had in a long time. I don't love their quarterback position. Let's say Lincoln Riley goes 8-5. I know the buyout's extensive, but, I mean, most of your great coaches turn it around in year 2, especially with a transfer portal. We don't know if Lincoln's a culture builder. We know he knows offense. What if he goes 8-5? Does he last?
I think the part which is tricky on predicting that is what happens. They have a really good recruiting class as of right now.
Yes.
How many of those kids end up signing with USC? To me, that's a big piece. And if you're not a top 15, top 20 team and Georgia or Ohio State come back in on those recruits, then do they end up coming here? Like, because the way I look at it, right now there is not a lot of momentum at USC. I mean, you just said it. The over-under is 7.5. I think right now they have a couple of really big-time receivers. Kamari Ramsey's a really good DB, but this is not like a very, very talented USC team. No one's talking about Jaden Mayava, who came from UNLV, as a guy who's going to be a first-round kind of quarterback. There's some potential there, but right now I don't think anybody looks at this team and says, oh, they're a playoff team. They're not very good on the offensive line. They're okay on the D-line, but they're not great. And you don't see a lot of, like, except for maybe Jacoby Lane, Mekhi Lemon, the receivers, those guys are big-time guys. But I feel like right now they're just struggling to get momentum. And if you throw in another 8-5, and that 8-5, would that include being 7-5 and winning a bowl game? I just think it's a hard sell. Now, the buyout is enormous. That is a deal that the old regime did that Jen Cohen got stuck with. And you wonder, where will the money come from? This isn't Texas A&M where they got Jimbo Fisher out, but like we're talking about a buyout that's going to be around $80 million in that range. Are people going to step up to pay that kind of money if they feel like this isn't going the direction we wanted it to go? I mean, it's a really interesting subject because, like, I agree with you. Lincoln's a really good offensive coach, but when he was at OU, he stepped in and took over for Bob Stoops, and there were a lot of big pieces in place.
Yep.
This was not this way. The athletic department, I feel like, is in a big transition mode, and it just doesn't feel like they've ever been able to get momentum after the first year when Caleb was there. and they had a good run, and then all of a sudden it started to backslide.
You know, it's Brian Kelly said today at SEC Media Days, he said, I can speak for the room. The Big Ten has it on us. Michigan, Ohio State have won natties. Penn State's favored to potentially win a third straight. What do you think is the primary reason? I have my own theories. I'll let you start on why clearly when I watched Big Ten football and SEC football over the last 2 years, clearly to me, Ohio State, Michigan, Penn State have as good or better athletes than the SEC. I did not feel that 3 years ago with Georgia and Bama. Why does it? What was the impetus for the big change?
Well, I think you start with Ohio State. They're different. They're more like an SEC school in terms of how they recruit than they are like a Big Ten school. I mean, they always, if you look in the last decade, I mean, you see it in all the guys in the NFL. I mean, they're different, right? And so you have guys with track records. I mean, receivers. You go with the guys Brian Hartline has developed there, and then you add a Jeremiah Smith, who's a generational talent, who's better than all the ones that they've had there. When you get to Michigan, I think it really had a lot to do with how Jim Harbaugh developed players. They were going to practice, be physical. And so you had a lot of that where they were able to retain talent. And a lot of guys on that national title team came back for one more year. I mean, the bottom fell out on them last year. They were an awful offensive team. They still had some good defensive players, and we saw that reflected in the draft. But I feel like that was different. And now where we're at with Penn State, very talented. James Franklin has recruited similar to what Ohio State has, like an SEC program. So I think because of that, you have, they're different than, whereas in the SEC, you probably have 7 or 8 schools that aren't that different. In the Big Ten, I feel like you have 2 or 3. We'll throw Oregon in there because they have recruited exceptionally well, and we saw that last year. But the rest of the Big Ten, when you start talking about Nebraska, Wisconsin fell off, Maryland, Rutgers, they're not at the level of, let's say, where Ole Miss is, where South Carolina is. South Carolina has a bunch of guys who are former 5-star recruits. And they had a really good year last year. They didn't make the playoff, but they were a dangerous team. Ole Miss went all in the portal. They spent a lot of money. You see what they did for Lane Kiffin. They were a team that was a playoff contender. They beat Georgia, right? They didn't beat Florida when they needed to, but they were a dangerous team. So I think there's just, to me, there's a top group of teams in the Big Ten that are like SEC teams. And then after that, I feel like there's a pretty sizable drop-off.
Belichick and UNC. So here's where I defend him. Forget the personal stuff for a second, although I think it's entertaining. Is that when you're a basketball school, how do you catch Clemson? Well, you have to be a disruptor. So Clemson's like, we're not going to do the NIL thing. And that's an opening. And so they say, we're going to do a pro model. We're going to go total pro model. Lombardi, Belichick. It's like when Oregon was looking up at USC and Washington. Phil Knight said, forget tradition. We're going to have 1,000 uniforms. We're going to go the opposite of Washington, Penn State, and USC and Michigan. And we're going to recruit California, and we're going to be crazy and motorcycles on the field. They were a disruptor. Chip Kelly, we're going to play call every 13 seconds, no huddles. That's how they're a power. So I look at Carolina saying, listen, we're a basketball school. Let's do the opposite of Clemson. It's the only way we can catch up to that brand and that facility is we are now officially a total pro model. And if that's the case, then Jordan Hudson, she's a social currency. It doesn't bother me. Do you think when you're around college sports and you talk to your sources, what do they make of Belichick and Carolina, Jordan Hudson? What do they make of the whole thing?
I think they don't know what to make of the Jordan Hudson piece of this, because we're talking about a guy who's in his 70s and a woman who's in her 20s. And I think people were hesitant to go talk about it a lot publicly until the CBS Sunday morning interview, and it became like kind of odd. And there were some other things where it just seemed a little out of character for Belichick, where it was always focused on football. And now all of a sudden he's promoting a book. And I think some of the things that came with it were a little just bizarre. The part where I think there's real buy-in is he's the greatest football coach in the history of the NFL. He's not Chan Gailey. He's not one of these guys who did both and came back. Like, he's the greatest football coach He's brilliant when it comes to offense and defense strategically and development. I could see why kids would want to play for him. You totally get it. They went in the portal late in the spring. They got a really good quarterback from South Alabama, Gio Lopez. I think he'll be a good fit for them. I think he will help them. And the part that where I'm fascinated by them is he's in the ACC. He's not in the Big Ten. He's not in the SEC. So most of these games take Clemson out of it for a bit. But most of the teams they're playing, they're kind of toss-up games, right? Because I feel like there's a lot of talent that's basically in the same level. There's not a ton of difference makers on the field in those ACC games. If you're better prepared and you execute better, you can win them. He could get them to 9-3, 8-4. And remember, Mac Brown had some good teams. Now, a bunch of those kids ended up leaving already, but I'm fascinated to see how this goes. I'm not as fascinated as I was, let's say, when Deion was there, because Deion was just such a force of nature and he was more compelling. This is a little bit different, but it's still very interesting because it's like an interesting experiment.
By the way, I want to talk Deion for a second. 2 years, but a 500 coach. His son is gone. His sons are gone. Travis Hunter's gone. Where are they? I mean, he's made them relevant, but the Big Ten and the SEC run the sport, and then maybe Clemson on the outside. What do you expect going forward? Now that all the flash, now that his son's gone, what is Colorado and Deion going forward?
Well, we can say he's a 500 coach, but I think in fairness to them, we got to point out they were 1-11 before he showed up. They were horrible. So he made them not only nationally relevant, but they were a top 25 team last year. Now, a lot of that certainly was you had a really good quarterback, his son, you had some really good receivers, and a generational two-way player in Travis Hunter. They still have a few good players around there. You know, he upgraded the offensive line. You got a former 5-star offensive tackle in Jordan Seaton. I think he's going to be a, future NFL player. They have, I feel like they have taken some of the momentum. The question is going to be, you had some guys who could just flat out win games, and they were close games. I don't know, they have a former quarterback recruit who was an Elite 11 kid, Julian Lewis, who was committed to SC. Now he's there. He's competing with Caden Salter, who was a really good running quarterback at Liberty. I think they will be different. But again, they're in the Big 12. I think they can compete with anybody in that league. I think they'll be pretty solid in the trenches, which they weren't when he first got there. I think they can at least be bowl eligible, and then we'll see, the next step if he can get some of those big difference makers that he brought with him from Jackson State.
Finally, I don't think there's a quarterback. I certainly don't remember. Andrew Luck was obviously great, but he wasn't flashy. It was Stanford. I don't remember an Arch Manning, and Tebow was great, but he wasn't really viewed. He was collegiate. Arch Manning, his family's American football royalty. I mean, I thought he was better than Quinn Ewers. Didn't say a word. Played backup. I've never seen a quarterback hyped to this level. I kind of buy that he is good. The little bit I've seen, he's athletic. He's got a nice arm. He's apparently gotten stronger. It puts a lot of pressure on Sark, who, let's be honest. The downside to Arch Manning is you've got Arch Manning, and people want you to go 12-1 in the SC, and Texas has a tough schedule. They open with Ohio State. What are your realistic expectations for Arch Manning this year, where we'll be comfortable? What do you expect to see?
I expect them to be a playoff team. I don't know if they're going to be the team that's in the national title game, because here's the thing. They lost a first-round receiver in Matthew Golden. They lost 4 starting offensive linemen, including both tackles. That's a lot to replace. I think they'll be really good on defense, even though they lost Jedi Barron, who was a first-round pick. But I think they'll be good up front on defense. And I expect him to live – this is crazy to say it because the hype is so big, but I do expect him to live up to the hype. You will see wow plays. Now, keep in mind, he has not played that much college football. He started a couple games. He is, to me, definitely more talented than Quinn Ewers. He is a much better athlete. The guys I know inside the Texas program have raved about Arch in terms of his football savvy, his playmaking ability, what he is character-wise. I think Sark is a really good fit for him. I don't know if they, go in. That's going to be our game. We're going to be in Columbus for Big Noon. Can't wait. That's going to be a really big matchup. I expect him to be really good. I don't know if we're going to say, oh, he's going to win the Heisman. I don't want to put that on him. I also don't want to say he's going to be the first pick in the draft, 11 months from now. I think he has that kind of talent, though. The comparison to Andrew Luck is interesting because Andrew, to me, was as close to can't miss as we had seen coming out of college. He was big. He was really smart. He was accurate. He could really run. Arch is a lot of those things. Now, what's different, obviously, is Andrew's dad played quarterback in the NFL. He wasn't the greatest quarterback or arguably the greatest quarterback in the NFL, and his grandfather wasn't a great player. It's like, as you said, that family is football royalty. But the stuff I've heard from people at Texas, much like Andrew, because people rave about Andrew's character still to this day, but around Stanford, remember, they were awful when he got there, when he committed, and then they got really good, and they were really, really good by the time he left at Stanford. This is already a really good Texas program. I think I'd be surprised if he does not excel there in a big way. Now, again, will he win a national title this year? That's putting a lot out there for, again, a team that has to replace almost the entire offensive line and their go-to receiver. But I expect him to be pretty special.
Bruce Feldman, great chopping it up in college football. We both love it. Obviously, you cover it on a daily basis. Good seeing you, bud.
Great seeing you guys.
Hey, thanks for watching. If you enjoy that clip, make sure you click subscribe somewhere down here. From game highlights to exclusive interviews and rankings, we've got everything you need as a college football fan right here, College Football on Fox.